guys, it's Julien, and today I'm super excited to be walking through my new track which just came out yesterday called Dark Nights. This track released on Spectre's label, Respect. Big thanks to the guys for the support and releasing the track. I'm super excited to be breaking it down for you guys. You can get the full project file, samples, the MIDI, the presets, literally everything from this track which has already been released on a professional label, and it's available right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. This also helps support me a lot, and yeah, let's go. Alright, so here's the project file, and the first thing that I want to talk about with this one is, as you can hear, it's a very, very simple track, you know? There's really not too many things going on here, aside from, like, this main lead, you know, the brow, the vocal, and then, like, this pad in the break. Other than that, it's really just percussion, like the kick, the hi-hats, the little percussion sounds, and, like, one effect sound down here, just like a little... like reverb quad, and that's it. So right off the bat, this is a really simple track, as you can see. And actually, something that I want to talk about with that is that a lot of times, like, the tracks that we think are better, a lot of times you think that just because it's simpler, and so when you hear it, you're kind of able to, like, listen to it and really get into it more, because you can kind of tell everything that's happening right away, and then you can decide whether you like it, versus if you're hearing something with, like, a million elements happening at once, then you're kind of like just trying to figure out what you're hearing before, you know, it's like you can't really get into it as much. So I think that's something to keep in mind here. And actually, when I sent this demo, I sent over, I think, like 8 tracks or something like that. Like, I usually don't just send one track, you know, usually you'd want to send at least 4. I sent this with a bunch of other tracks, and sure enough, Dark Nights was the simplest track in that pack, and that's the one that they signed. So that's something that you want to keep in mind, like, really, really simple tracks are a lot of times going to be more effective. Like with techno, it's really about like having like one really solid idea and communicating that idea the best you can, rather than having like, you know, this crazy synth and this crazy synth and this breakbeat. It's like just kind of focus on a few really like strong main things. So the first thing up here is the vocal sample, which sounds like this.
Dark nights, dark nights go on. Dark nights go on and on and on and on.
So yeah, that's the vocal sample you hear. It's from this breakbeat Paradise. Shout out, if you know, you know. I've got this here. It's just like a classic kind of like, you know, old school, almost like a house vocal or something like that. It just really works well. Like when I have like multiple different things like this happening in a track, you know, like let's say like the most busy part where it's the bass synth, the lead, and then this vocal as well. You can hear it does really good call and response, because you're getting brown dark nights, brown dark nights go, you know what I mean? So it's like kind of playing with that like dynamic between there, and then that really just comes down to like finding a vocal that's gonna fit into that place. You can also see this is going through the send down here, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I'll show you the effects that are on this first. It's really simple. So we just have a high pass filter. We have an echo here, which is, yeah, just doing dotted eighth notes. So that's giving that kind of like very dubby, kind of like organic sounding echo. Then it's just going through a bit of saturation. I have this de-esser as well from Waves, which I'll show you that really quick. So it's just a simple one. Honestly, you don't need this. If you don't have that plugin, you know, you could just turn it off. It's still cool. I just like doing a little bit of fine tuning there. But then finally, I just have a low pass filter, which just kind of brings us in the intro. You know, nice way to arrange it and make that a bit smoother. Then we have the main lead / bass synth, which sounds like this. So yeah, as you can see, very, very simple lead. It's literally just brown, like one note up, you know, not really that crazy. But again, that was the idea behind the tune, was to see like how much I can just communicate just brown, and how well I can work that into a full track essentially. But the other thing here is like, you know, when you're working with like something, like I'd say this sound is maybe like 80% sound design, 20% notes, because it's like a very nice texture to the sound. It's very fat. It's just really, really full. You know, it's super in your face. It's really not so much about the notes, you know, it's really about like showcasing how good that sounds. Versus like, you know, if I try to jump around, like let's say we try to write a melody with this one, like let's say we're gonna play something like that, right? Well, you know, you don't really get the texture of the synth as well. Versus if you just write something really simple, you know, it's a little bit more easy to just focus in on what the synth sound is doing. Now it is playing in that part, so that's really simple. It's still the same two notes, E and F. I just added an A in there. So all throughout the track, the sound really just plays 3 notes. That's all. But again, like, it's about communicating that rather than saying, oh, that's too simple. How are we gonna, you know, add something on top to make it crazy? Because as you can see, you don't really need to add something on top. So for the sound here, I actually made this one with Serum, and what this is based on a preset. Shout out to Zen World. This is a preset from the preset pack that we made together. I have it somewhere in here. But what I did was I just took it and I tweaked it. This was like a bass sound. And yeah, and then I just kind of worked with these saw waves here. I think it was just like one saw wave at the start. And there were a bit more things happening here with like the filter and stuff. But you'll see this one's really simple. Then there's just some hyper dimension, which there's without it. And then with it. So you can see not really doing too much here. We have some distortion, which as you can hear, really important for this one. We also have this delay, which is doing 2 different times. So we got like the left and right ear doing 2 different things. So you can kind of, you can hear that gives you like a nicer kind of stereo image. And it also affects the texture of the sound. Speaking of that, then we have this compressor. So here's without that. And then with it, you can hear this really brings out those mids and highs when you put on the multiband mode on the Serum compressor like this. Really good for making that like super just crunchy, big fat bass sound. And then finally, I just have a high boost in there. So that's all that's happening in the plugin. Now, something I want you to keep in mind here really is like just how simple this is, right? You know, it's literally just detuned saw waves, a bit of distortion and some other stuff, but like this isn't like that crazy. You know, you can make this sound very easily. However, what I think is not so easy to do is not messing it up, if that makes any sense. So like a lot of times when people make just this, just the 2 saw waves, you know, then they want to go in and add like a phaser or like a flanger or something like that, or like have some crazy filter modulation, or maybe like do like the reverb filter or something like that. And like, yeah, that is gonna sound cool. You might be able to come up with some interesting stuff that way. But again, like, it's really like, I think there's really an art form to not messing up your synth sounds and just being able to have just the 2 saw waves working really well, and you know, have that be enough to communicate your idea without having to go through and do all this extra stuff with like, you know, no one wants to hear modern talking in a techno track. And then I just have that going through a bit of reverb, just with the hollow room here, like using this one a lot. Then I just have this EQ, which is cutting out a little bit of, just a tiny bit of space for the kick there at 100 hertz. I have some drum bus, as you would expect. Here's without that. And with it, you notice it's not actually really quieter without it. Like, I've got it so that it's not too loud, but there's just like a certain fullness that you get. It's like, you know, without this, we have that in the mid-range and highs, that like coming through, but you don't really have the like which is just as important. So this drum bus really helps to do that. And like a lot of the effort for this track really was just like dialing in this drum bus with like the distortion and the multiband and stuff like that on the bass synth, just to make it like as fat as possible. Like if you just make a synth like this and then just go in and just like, alright, let's just get a little bit of saturation. You know, it's gonna sound like that. You're not gonna have that like the real body to the sound. So again, when you have a simple track like this, it's not that it's gonna take you less time to make because it's simpler or anything like that. It's the same amount of time, but you can see we're putting that amount of time into different things than we would if we had a more busy arrangement. And then there's just this high pass here, which just comes in just in some of these breaks. Excuse me, it comes on when the kick is playing, but then it turns off in the breaks, because in the breaks, obviously, you want to let through the low end. So there's a lot of good bass in the sound, and there's no bass playing there, so might as well. But then in the actual, like, these parts, We just have that to make it work with the kick, basically. Because if you don't have this in those parts, you can see it starts to clash with the kick. Then I have this washout rack here, which is basically just a bunch of like reverb and stuff like that. You can see it just comes like every, I want to say that's like 16 bars there. Yeah, it is. It just kind of washes the sound out a little bit, you know. Gives it some nice variation. I also have this little thing here, which is kind of an extension of the Basin. So all that is it's just like a simple little reverse. So all you have to do to do this, I can actually show you. Okay, yeah, so basically, like, if we reverse it, you can see that all it is it's just the tail of reverb from that synth, and then I just reversed it, and then it makes it go like. Then when that bass note hits, it's so much more powerful. So, simple trick there. Definitely works really well. Then we have this brake pad, which if you look at the chord, there's only 3 notes. We're in the key of E minor, technically. So what I'm doing here is I'm just playing this E minor 9 chord. So this kind of breaks the music of the track, in theory, because there's an F sharp, and then there's also an F playing in the bass at the same time. But this is really one of those things where it's like, if it sounds good, it is good. You know, it sounded good, so I'm not really too worried about, like, you know, being super careful with that stuff. And it's not like there's a million other instruments that this would clash with either, so it works here. But yeah, so really simple, just an E minor 9 chord, but kind of like the most basic voicing of that, because we literally just have the root note and the minor third, which would be pretty standard stuff there, but then we have that 9th in there. And then usually, like, you would have the 9th up an octave, and then, you know, you'd have, like, your 5th, maybe even like a 7th if you're feeling it. But here we just took the 9th, put it right under the minor third, and you just get this like very kind of like mysterious, ominous pad like this. And so the sound here is in the CS80. It's actually this Cosmos preset, but then I tweaked it a little bit. Like I worked with the filter and some of the modulation to make it a little bit more unique to what I needed here. But what I really like about this pad is that it's kind of like constantly moving. You know, it's like, whoa. So it works really well with this long break. Because if you're going to have one chord play over and over and over, you know, you have to find something to be exciting about it. And that, or something about it that's going to be exciting for the listener is what I mean. And so you can hear that. Hear that movement. Just kind of makes it that much more like alive. And exciting to listen to. And then I have some more of a hell room on this one. We've got some drum bus. Then I just have a high pass filter, which is cutting out the lows to make room for the bass. And then also this low pass filter here, which just brings it in and out. You can see it just makes it go up, and then all the way back down at the end there. Next thing that we have here is the kick. And it's a pretty simple kick. It's 2 layers. So we have our main kick, and then we also have this one. And so this one's just adding that click on top. So here's what it sounds like if I play you with just the kick 1. And then here's with the clicked kick. So yeah, it makes that like a lot punchier. And sometimes that's all you need, just that little like tiny click over top of it to just sit perfectly on kick 1, which is really bassy. And then I have a high pass filter on this, which comes on and off. Yeah, you can see that, you know. That's pretty standard techno stuff, pretty dynamic. And then I also just have a little bit of drum bus, which is grouping these together and kind of like making them fit better together. Then we have our percussion, which... So yeah, you can see we have our main hi-hat. It's 2 layers. This one. And then this one for the highs. And also this whole group is going through that send, so you can hear that. And then that's just going through some saturation. Then we have like this little percussion, which I chopped up a bit. So you can hear what that's doing. Just kind of add some flow in there. Then we have like a ride cymbal. which is going through this ping pong echo to kind of give it a bit more of a stereo width. And then also, I really like the shaker loop. It kind of like pans back and forth a little bit, and it's just really fat. And so that's all that the percussion needs to be. You know, just one thing for sort of like each element. Like we have a main like hi-hat. We have a main hi-hat to do the tick-tick-tick. We have some percussion, which is going to be minimal, but it is there. Kind of bounce off the kick, and then just a ride. And we don't really need to add like a bunch of extra little background stuff, because again, it's just a good, simple track that's gonna work because these are good elements. You know, another thing is like, if you're going through and adding like 5 layers to your shaker, it's like, well, maybe your first shaker wasn't really that good, right? Like, you know, if you need so many extra things on there, like, maybe you might just need to find really good samples to work with from the start so that you're not like constantly trying to make them sound professional. It's just kind of, you're already working with the building blocks sounding really good like that. And on the group of that, we just have a bit of saturation. You know, I don't like to use too much drum bus on the hi-hats anymore because it can kind of make them a bit too like you get that like kind of crunchy low end thing happening. So just a bit of saturation, and EQ just cutting out and just boosting the highs a bit. And then this low pass, which just kind of makes these disappear here. You know, it's just a nice trick at the beginning of the break. Just make those disappear. And this little effect down here is just a little like clap. It's just something that I really like, which is like, you know, a lot of times people would have like a right when this hits, right? Like right when you get back to the beat dropping. But I kind of like having the clap where it's going to hit essentially on the 4th. So like if we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like if we're counting it out like that, it's hitting on the 4th. So we're going. So it actually makes this a lot more impactful. Versus if we just had like a right as soon as that hits. Because now dun, dun, versus just all at once. So that's something to keep in mind there with like when you're working with these. And that's just going through some reverb as well. And then the last thing down here is this kick send delay. So we're using this on like almost everything in the track. Ironically not on the kick, but yeah, on almost everything is going through this. And it just kind of gives everything like this more even texture. Because you can just kind of hear it all like coming through the same processing at once. Here's the track if I turn this off. And then if I turn it on. So this is like another thing that's really good with these simple tracks, because if you have a really, really simple track and it's only a few elements, you know, you want to add more elements to that, but you don't want to actually add more elements. So this is essentially, like the way I'm thinking of this, it's like a percussion loop that we're adding in there, but it's just based on like everything that's already in the track. So it doesn't really feel like you're like, you know, going through and actually adding a whole percussion loop on top of there. But you're kind of creating one instead out of everything that's in the track. And it fills it out really nicely. So this is just like a combination of like these 3 delays here. You know, they're all like stacking on top of each other, so you're getting like a very textured feel from that. And lots of different movements happening there. And then it's just a bit of saturation and a high pass filter. But again, it's just a really good way to kind of add this background loop to the track. And yeah, so that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. You can get the track Dark Nights on Beatport. It's available right now. The link is at the top of the description. You can also get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that for just $10 on my Bandcamp. This really helps to support me. If you guys like these videos, definitely consider picking this up because it helps keep me going. I don't make a whole lot just off of YouTube. But with these project files and different things like this, I'm able to keep going and keep bringing you guys new videos. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.